What's going on, guys? Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Garrison Roy, and today we're going to have a little bit of a rant. But if you are new to the podcast, we do have several different types of episodes, right? We have full-length interviews where a lot of coaches, players, people who are talking about how they get in the zone or help other players get into a training zone or skill acquisition zone of being more, filling up the zone as far as a pitcher, or even just knowing what their zone is as a hitter. Or we have the mental minute game hacks that help elevate that mental game performance, and also some deep dive educational ones to help you just kind of get into the little more intricacies, getting into the weeds, so to speak, right? But if you have any, really, honestly, guys, submit whatever you think you're interested in, and I can unpack it, or even dive in more and kind of go down rabbit holes with you. Send those in, DM me, text me, email it into in the zone podcast 123 at gmail.com. Because again, we're trying to grow the game. That's why I don't do ads or sponsorships. This is all just a word of mouth podcast that helps those of you who are listening to pay it forward. If you share the show, if you get any value out of it, that's really what we're trying to do, is give out as much value to everyone that's listening as much as possible. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get right into this one. Obviously, it's a rather hot topic on today's, uh, baseball talks, if you will, or anything I'm seeing across X, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. People are talking about the high rise of arm injuries in professional baseball. And, it's sad to see, but obviously if you've been in baseball, you know that this has been a problem for a while. And now that there's so many guys at the pro level going down, now a lot of people are kind of questioning things even more. It's just getting more publicity, I guess. But I kind of have my own reasoning as to why there's a lot of guys on the IR injured reserve list, right? Which at today's date, April 9th, 2024, there were over 120 guys, pitchers alone, that were on injured reserve, whether it was just a general, like full on surgical, or different pathologies where it was, forearm flexor routine, or, things that are tendonitis and common reoccurring injuries that might rear its head here and there. But again, that's a lot. And especially as much as a lot of teams push money into pitchers, that's a lot of money down the drain, so to speak. Right. And a lot of people, especially at the younger ages, they throw the pitch count at it. They're like, oh, they're just throwing too many pitches. Or now, with Major League Baseball making the league rule change of the pitch clock, they're throwing it at that. They're like, oh, it's the pitch clock. They're getting less rest time, which could be very valid reasons, but I think you need to unpack it a little bit more and really kind of see the big picture, right? And me, I love context. I love bringing in just about any piece that we can bring in. And with that pitch clock change, really over the past 3 or 4 years, there's also been a higher percentage of off-speed pitches being thrown, right? And I have the stats for that of 2022 to 2023. Just those 2 years alone, the fastball usage, or the percentage of how fastballs are thrown, went from 59% to 56%. Again, not drastic, but when you have a lot of pitches put together, you know that, okay, 3% is bringing in a lot more off-speed pitches. And you could argue, and there's studies out there that say, hey, off-speed, breaking pitches are less stressful on the arm than fastballs. May or may not be true. I think it's really dependent on a lot of factors. Again, it's more than just one thing, because it could be pitches under pressure. I think that's a massive stat that's underrated, that needs to probably, for maybe more advanced guys at the pro level, a pitch and a half. For the younger guys, middle school guys that are pitching with runners on, especially early in the season, maybe you count those pitches under pressure where, you have runners on base, or, in a high pressure situation, you count those as two pitches, right? And I think as guys are ramping up and getting into this, and again, kind of unpacking this and going to zoom out a little bit more, but as they're ramping up into their season, right? A lot of pro guys that I've known, they try to get almost the same amount of bullpen pitches as they would for live. But I think that's a mistake. I think guys need to all kind of take that ratio of what I was talking about before, those pitches under pressure when you have a hitter in the box, right? Versus just a standard like Ham just going through a pen and kind of touch and feel, right? You need to kind of take those into more of account. Like, hey, I can throw, 45 pitches in a just very low intent standard bullpen. But 45 pitches in a game, and especially if those are in one inning, that's way too much for one inning. But again, those rest time periods do matter. That's a totally different stress, right? So thinking about that and how all of that's kind of coming and rolling into play, obviously, I love to kind of touch on Justin Verlander's comments on this, which I'll pull up that video here in a second. But really, it kind of took me back to whenever he first started out in his career. And again, this isn't the exact years that he started, but for just general fastball velocity, obviously we all know that fastball velocities are trending up. And I wanted to get the exact stats on that. So since 2002, right, 88.5 miles an hour was the league average fastball, right? Now, 2022, so again, still 2 years ago, we don't really know if the fastball velocity of last year compared to this year quite yet, because obviously we're just starting the season. But again, 94.9 miles an hour is the average fastball in 2022. So huge jump in velo, right? If we could round that up to 95, 88 to 95, that's like a mid-level college arm to a power 5 arm, right? As of right now. And again, guys in college are even throwing even harder, right? Since 2019, the average college-wide, so this is D3 NAI all the way up to D1, those went from 87.5 to 89.3 is the general average, fastballs only. So, and those are just the ones that were being tracked. There's probably games out there that probably don't have much velocity going on or any of that being tracked, but those are just the ones that we've been able to collect data on, right? So something to definitely be said about that, where it's like, okay, hey, these are trending upward. Obviously, I think people like myself, guys who are going and training and helping guys get them move better, get their physicality and, mobility and everything locked in. A lot of things in baseball have become a lot more efficient since 2002, right? And me thinking back in 2002, obviously I was in second grade. The Braves dynasty was still going on where they were in the playoffs almost every single year, right? 2002 is also the Angels won the World Series. So they were playing the Giants. 2003, 2004 was whenever the Red Sox broke their curse. So there's been a lot of things that have happened, and I don't even remember seeing weighted balls or plyos being tossed around until probably about 2009. 2010 was usually the first time I even really saw them. So that was really before any of that. So if you notice of all these trends again, so we're zooming out a whole lot more, kind of taking a bigger step back, where we go from that, and that's again where Verlander's career kind of started, to trickling up to now, where there's so many choices of different types of training modalities to do. It's almost the norm, or it's also kind of weird if you don't train or you don't have some type of program that you're on, as far as strength training, throwing program, insert weighted balls, or whatever other modality you want to put in there. There's a plethora of that now, right? All across the board, from the big leagues all the way down to little league t-ball, right? There's just a plethora, almost an infodemic, if you will, where there's just too much going on, really. And so with that, obviously, is allowing guys to perform better. It's just part of it, right? Whenever you have all of that, all those resources and all those funds thrown at it, things tend to improve, right? But at what cost, right? And am I saying that all of those things are causes to the arm injuries? No. But whenever you're looking to try to find or infer something, you always want to look at the delta or the change. What changed since blank, right? Not saying that just because the velocity goes up is because the arm injuries are cranking up. And I always kind of shake my head at some of the folks that I hear. They're like, "Oh, well, throwing a baseball isn't natural." Well, you drive a car every day, and that's not natural either, but it doesn't stop you from getting behind the wheel. And it's not going to stop kids from trying to throw a baseball as hard as they can. So people are going to do it, even as much as you bang on that old adage, if it's not natural, you can't really stop these kids from playing baseball. So what are we going to do to help protect them? What are we going to help to do to mitigate some of these? And business partner Rob Blanc had a really solid post, put it out on a Twitter thread today, where he was talking about the injuries and how a lot of the pro orgs, again, and a lot of people think oh, it's Major League Baseball, they must have all the resources in the world. Not necessarily true. There's organizations that have a lot of good resources and they utilize them very well. Some are kind of in the middle. They have a lot of resources, don't utilize them well. Or on the other side, they don't have many resources compared to the other guys, and they don't know what they don't know, right? And again, I'm not trying to knock on professional baseball. It's just the reality where some guys have a lot more than some of the other ones that are the lower tier teams. I mean, great example of that. If you watch Moneyball, just in terms of money and how much they're willing to pay players goes into a lot of it as well. But he said that he wants fully funded diagnostic department, like on the show House, uh, organization-wide workload management systems like wearables or just being able to track certain things over time, and increase the standards of staffs and coaches. So, not just having any run-of-the-mill guy work there, actually put them a little bit through more of a system, and then also heavily invest in the rehab departments, PT, ATs, strength training, overall development, pitching coaches, right? I think that does kind of go hand in hand when you're raising that standard. Those standards of those people who are helping with these things will also increase. So there's a lot of things to kind of think about here. And again, it's more than the pitch clock. It's more than, just off-speed pitches increasing. It's more than just the training, the conditioning, or the ramp up, which I've been a really big proponent of, as they're starting to ramp up, they need to have some type of similar ratio, or, not ramping up too soon. And maybe, I've heard some guys where they're like, hey, maybe we push back the season, where they go from all these really warm weathers in Florida and Arizona to then the really cold weather. And again, that's also a change. If you think about it, that is something that is different. If they're doing really, really well in spring training and all of a sudden they go play in the cold, their bodies kind of have to go through a shock. And if you're expecting them to not only pitch in those conditions, but also increase their workload in those conditions, it's kind of asking our guys a lot. And again, not saying it can't be done, but there has to be some other parts to be able to integrate into that. And maybe could see of it as maybe a little bit more of a college start, where maybe guys don't go any more than 3 or 4 innings. You bring out and roll out a bunch more starters. Maybe you expand the roster size to have more pitchers available to be able to do that. So we don't have position players throwing in the middle of July of some of those games. I think that would definitely help some arms as well. I mean, not saying a whole lot, like if it's a 26 or 27 man roster, expand it to 28, 29, maybe 30 at the max. If you go into the playoffs, maybe you cut that back a little bit because you don't need that many guys. But some of those series guys they're grueling. Like, let me tell you, no one's arms fresh for the entire season. It's just not happening. They're not walking out of there thinking that, oh yeah, I'm ready to rock and roll today. My arm is fresh and ready to go. By July, August, September, those arms are hanging. Willing to bet. Talk to a lot of guys that at the end of the season, they're like, I don't even want to think about baseball. I don't want to pick up a baseball. And they take their time off and try to just have that mental reset. right? So again, there's a lot of solutions to this. This is just kind of some of my observations. But before we go, I do want to share Justin Verlander's video on this. I think it's very, very important, and we'll kind of touch on this here after we watch.
I think the game has changed a lot. You know, I think it'd be easy to sit here and blame the pitch clock. You know, I think in reality, you put everything together, and everything has a little bit of influence. You know, I think the biggest thing is the style of pitching has changed so much. You know, everybody's throwing as hard as they possibly can, and spinning the ball as hard as they possibly can, and you know, it's hard to deny those results. Obviously, how can you? It's a double-edged sword. How can you tell somebody to go out there and not do that when they're capable of throwing 100? And you know, so this young guy comes up and throws a pitch 95 and gives up a big homer, and everybody's like, "What the hell, man?" So something needs to change. I don't have all the answers. I know pitching. You know, and I've been. I don't want to beat a dead horse here. It is what it is. I think the data's out there at this point, but when the balls started to change back in 2016 and they started flying out a bit more frequently, I know myself personally that started changing how I had to approach pitching. You have to start swinging. You have to start approaching the batter as I want swing and miss. I can't have him put the ball in play where the old adage, pitch down, pitch away from the guy, hit your spot, get weak contact early in the count. And then you can kind of go up, and that kind of went out the window. When everybody started being able to leave the yard, especially opposite field. You know, and look, I like I said, I'm not here to. I've said my piece on that before in the past, and it is what it is. As long as we're all out here competing on an even playing field, that's what I care about, and we all have the same baseball in our hands. So that's that. But I do think that you throw that in the mix, and you throw analytics in the mix, and you throw the pitch clock in the mix, and it all kind of adds up. And it's unfortunate. I don't know how we rewind the clock. Maybe there's some sort of way to incentivize starting pitching, going deeper in games. You know, I remember I talked to Scherzer at length last year with the Mets, and we talked about having, you know, the starting pitcher be tied to a DH, and having, you know, you have to achieve certain milestones before. If the pitcher comes out and he hasn't achieved any of those milestones, you lose your DH. So at least the team is incentivized to teach their pitchers to go through the lineup 3 times. Whereas right now, nobody's incentivized to do that. No teams are incentivized to tell their pitcher, okay, like let's go through the lineup 3 times. Let's navigate a lineup. Those aren't conversations that are had anymore. Nobody's fault. It's just the nature of the game where it's at right now. But if that mind shift switches and teams start incentivizing, okay, how do we get guys out 3 times? Because right now, 3rd time through the lineup, they're looking for an excuse to take you out. Because analytically, it says that batters have more success 3rd time through. You know, so I can't sit here and blame anybody. But the second that you start incentivizing pitchers staying in the game longer, throwing 110 pitches, throwing 100 pitches, you know, navigating the lineup, then the trickle down permeates all the way to Little League baseball. You know, everybody's trying to get to this level. So, you know, you want to go play D1, now you got to throw hard and you got to spin the ball well. You want to go to the minor leagues, you got to throw hard, spin the ball well. And, you know, it all starts from here down. The second that you start incentivizing pitching and guys are getting drafted because they can pitch and get guys out, then that goes down a level, and then down a level and down a level. And, you know, I just hope that we don't wait too long, because you know, it can you know, it's obviously a pandemic and it's going to take years to work itself out, because everybody right now, Little League on, go look no further than Instagram. I can't look at my Instagram feed without seeing, you know, some kids trying to learn how to throw as hard as they can at 10 years old. I sure as hell didn't do that. You know, I didn't figure it out until college. I matured into my body. I was, you know, I say it all the time. If I came up in today's world, I don't know what would happen. My mechanics were a little different. I was tall, lanky, lean, you know, skinny, lean, weird, kind of hadn't hit my maturity. Went to college, didn't get drafted, went to college and kind of grew into myself, and all of a sudden started throwing hard. But it wasn't because I did some, you know, program to make me throw harder. So it's hard question.
No doubt. And great point there that I actually forgot to bring up too, is the baseball change and professional baseball. That definitely probably is a factor. And it, again, all of these things that are changing shifts really every player's perspective on what they got to do. Oh, these guys are going to throw at these big facilities, you got to throw the ball harder, spin the ball faster, have really good stuff, then you got to do something about it, right? Like you can't be left in the dust. The same thing in the steroid era, right? Say what you want to say about it, but if every other guy's doing it, you want to keep getting paid and stay in the big leagues, you probably might have to do some of that, right? And again, there's some guys who didn't, and I definitely applaud them for maintaining their integrity. But some of the guys who did, also, I'm kind of like, dude, I kind of don't blame you. Like, if I was in that position, would have I'd have done the same thing? I don't know. Uh, it's almost like as if, for example, like me as a coach, hey, if you're not doing a podcast, you're probably not going to get as many players on your program, which isn't true, but right, like if everyone started doing a podcast and that was the main metric for helping get in more leads, then I'm sure everybody would start doing a podcast, right? Or at least have some version of one or have their own little spin-off of it. So just something to think about, mull over. I know I kind of rambled a little bit on some of these things, but it's more than just trying to put the blame on one thing. It's multiple things that we have to take into account, and even, you know, looking into cumulative pitch loads, or, there's so many conversations that need to be had, but obviously every single stone needs to be unturned in order for us to just make any progress in this. Um, but that's all I have for this episode. If you guys have any comments, any other takes, what you might think is, causing some of these arm injuries to increase, let me know. But outside of that, stay in the zone.